Usually, I don't pre-order or pre-purchase a game out of principle, but Amplitude is one of the few studios I have near blind faith in. Ever since their first title, Endless Space, I have been a huge fan of theirs. Humankind, the newest original project by Amplitude Studios, has had something called an OpenDev going on from the 15th to the 28th of December 2020, essentially serving as an extended alpha test, exclusive for people who pre-ordered the game already, me included. Humankind is a fresh take on the historical 4X strategy scene, which has been utterly dominated by Sid Meier's Civilization series for a good 20 years already, with the main differences being the way cities are built out and territories controlled, as well as the ability to pick a different culture each era, stacking some bonuses throughout the game and allowing more flexibility in your playstyle in a single game instead of being locked to a specific playstyle depending on that one pre-game choice. This OpenDev is the second one of its kind. The first OpenDev was a lot more restricted, with only small, strict scenarios to go through, while this time around it gives you free reign over the first 4 eras and the first 150 turns of a regular game. This scenario uses the same map and starting positions each time, however, likely for diagnostic purposes and to handle feedback better, so keep that in mind. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to not only try out the game myself for the first time, but also to share my first impressions, not only with Amplitude themselves, but with the internet in general. So in this video, I'll be summarizing my pros and cons with the game so far. Do keep in mind that this is not yet a finished product, as the game is slated to be fully released in April 2021, only about 5 months to go from today. So this seems to be a highly representable slice of gameplay as far as I'm concerned, but something to keep in mind nevertheless. First of all, the similarities between Humankind and Endless Legend are obvious. Endless Legend being a fantasy-fi 4X game developed by Amplitude in the past, set in their endless universe, and Humankind certainly draws its fair share of inspirations from the title when it comes to gameplay, which I'll mention as we come across them. Visually, the game is stunning, with an art style that's realistic and slightly cartoony at the same time. It both brings a sense of scale and a clear overview of the map. The natural tiles look beautiful, with a wide variety of different types of terrains and natural features, while city tiles fit perfectly within this natural world, with architecture depending on what culture you are and evolving over time with your culture as well, with other parts retaining the architecture it was built in originally, like a city center. Though this OpenDev version only goes until the early modern era, just after the Middle Ages, so there's no industrialization or skyscrapers quite yet. But what we do see here so far is marvelous. There's even some smog visible in the districts of the bigger, more industrious cities, and with people even visibly walking between the different districts and the like, this all looks quite breathtaking to be sure. But what are visuals without sound? Just like in the Endless games, the music here is essentially perfect.
Blades in the water.
Determined by what era you're in and even what culture you are, or so it seems to me at least, with some more epic vocalized pieces here as well. This definitely sounds like a game soundtrack I'll put on whenever I want, even when not playing the game, just to enjoy it for the music itself. Amazingly enough, you can even change in the settings how much pause you want between different tracks while you're playing the game. So if you like some silence between two music pieces, you are free to do so, as well as wanting non-stop music as well. Sound effects wise, this too shows inspiration from the endless titles, with soft, chiming sounds as you navigate through the menus or click the end turn button. I have had the sound breaking a few times, however, combined with the whole game crashing or almost crashing, but it's still an alpha, like I said, so this is no big deal for now at least. I don't think we'll see a cyberpunk moment here though. But aside from looking and listening, the main thing here is obviously playing the game itself, so how do we go about that? There's a handy tutorial or overview video you can watch to get some of the basics, and in-game there are a lot of tutorial messages as well, but these are not fully implemented yet. I totally missed the tutorial video when I first started though, so it took a while until I noticed some things at the beginning of the game. I imagine the full release will have a more substantial tutorial, as it's also mentioned in the Getting Started video, but even now there definitely is a lot of information already made quite clear. One thing that could be a very interesting addition on this front is a similar system like in Crusader Kings 3, where hovering over keywords with the mouse opens up extra informational panels. The encyclopedia isn't included yet though, so this issue will likely disappear when that'll be added in the full release. As well as other minor things lost in the UI, like not being able to see what exactly a luxury resource grants you if you buy one from another empire in the diplomacy screen, small stuff like that. Having every piece of information available on every screen in the game would of course be a bit of an information overload, but I hope you see what I'm trying to say here. The start of the game is fundamentally different from Civilization, since you don't start with a settler and a warrior. In fact, you only unlock a settler in the early modern era. So where do we get to the expansion of 4X then? Well, first of all, the game world is divided into territories. These have outlines on the map and are predetermined, like in Endless Legend. In these territories, you can build an outpost. Every army you have can do this. Building an outpost costs influence, which is a resource you earn at first by exploring and finding curiosities, which is the objective of the Neolithic era in which you start, and later is generated by cities. Once you have enough influence, you can build an outpost wherever you want, thereby claiming the territory it's built in as being yours. These outposts have no upkeep, but are undefended, so can be easily ransacked and destroyed by enemies, though this is no problem at the start of the game. An outpost is no city, however, and as long as you are in the Neolithic era, you can't actually construct a city either. A notification for when an outpost finishes construction would be very welcome here, as they are seemingly not present yet in the game, since outposts can also build resource extractors and harbors, as well as the upgrade to a city taking a while after your first one. Losing turns because you simply forgot to look the way of the outpost to see if it was already finished is a bit goofy. Since the Neolithic era requires exploration and bars city building, this really opens up the world a lot more than in Civilization. If you don't settle your first city by turn 2 or 3 at the latest in Civ, you are at a huge disadvantage because the other empires are already busy constructing their empire. While here in Humankind, it is expected that the first few turns are just spent exploring around and getting a lay of the land. The whole game does this really, with different eras being more fit for a specific X in 4X, which really encapsulates that feel. So you explore some more, constructing outposts as you please to secure territories, hunting animals for food so you gain more units, until you reach your first era star, and can advance to the classical era by choosing your first culture. Each culture is exclusive, meaning the first empire to advance has the pick of the litter, while the last one to advance has to do with whatever scraps are left. Each culture promotes its own playstyle out of 7, granting you a boon, a unique unit, and a unique quarter to construct. These are called emblematic units and quarters, by the way. Babylonians are a scientific culture, for example, while Hittites are a warmongering one. Those era stars I mentioned are earned through reaching playstyle-specific milestones, like researching technologies for a scientific star or killing enemy units for the militaristic one. All of this has a very nice overview in game as well, but to start gaining those era stars, you need cities. You can upgrade any outpost you have into a city, opening up construction possibilities, research, civics, and later down the line, faith. Cities can build a few types of things. Districts or quarters placed on the map to exploit resources surrounding them, which sounds very familiar if you've played Civilization 6, so you might think they ripped it off from that game or something, but Endless Legend had the exact same mechanics, so yeah, not really. These resources will sound very familiar to you if you've played an Endless game before. Fimsy, This used to be fidzi, but dust is replaced by actual money here. Of course, makes sense. The F is for food, which is a city-specific resource. The higher the food rate, the faster the population grows, and the faster a new worker is added to increase production further, just like in Endless Legend. The first I stands for industry, which is also a city-specific resource and determines the speed of all construction projects, including units. M is for money. This one is an empire-wide resource and is used, so far, mainly to buy out construction projects and units or to settle diplomatic disputes by way of monetary reparations. S is for science, which is also an empire-wide resource. This one is self-explanatory. It determines the rate at which new technologies are researched, and the tech tree will look very familiar if you've played Civilization 5 or 6, and is very serviceable with some nice artwork here as well. The last letter and the second I stands for influence, which, as mentioned before, is needed for expansion, to build outposts as well as to assimilate outpost territories into cities, or even merge cities together later down the line. Wonders are also claimed first with influence, which then unlocks it to be constructed at your leisure, instead of having to rush it to stay ahead of the pack like in Civilization, which is a positive in my book. These wonders are then placed on the map, similar to how Civilization 6 started handling wonders as well, and these wonders are also considered shared projects, meaning that you can start a construction in whichever city you want, and that every other city you have can also lend their industry to its construction, speeding up the process significantly if you so desire. Holy sites are also considered shared projects. Then there's also infrastructures, which are the same as basic buildings in Civilization games. Improving your city by increasing resource yields on the map, or by increasing the output of your workers in your districts, improving defenses, stuff like that. Lastly, we have units, which are almost exclusively military. There are no worker units here, since exploitation is done exclusively through your quarters or districts, and roads are laid automatically between cities and outposts once you've researched the wheel. While quarters are very visible on the map, even when zoomed out fully, you can still see their little street layouts from above, which looks very satisfying by the way, but I did have some trouble telling apart different types of quarters. A farmer's quarter and a maker's quarter, which generates industry, look quite alike. This could very well just be me that doesn't see the right things that differentiates them, and hovering over the tile with your mouse always tell you what's built there anyways. And the emblematic quarters are very unique and recognizable on their own, so it's not that big of a deal. Infrastructures don't change anything in the visual aspect of the city center though, as opposed to the way it works in Civilization these days. But this is a minor complaint, as the sprawling quarters with their unique architectures, depending on your culture, carry the visual feast here on their own. Especially once you've built walls, with them being dependent on the surrounding tiles. Cliff faces or mountains don't need walls on top of them, for example, which gives it all a very natural feel. Terrain in general is very interesting and offers a lot of verticality, and a lot more than I was expecting, at least on this specific map. It is a set map for this scenario, as I've mentioned, but if this is the par for the randomly generated maps, then there is a lot to look forward to here. Even in a single territory, the visuals and terrain can vary wildly. Each territory can only support one city, and the city can only exploit resources within that territory. So building an outpost right at the border of a territory, like I did at first, is not a great idea. As mentioned before, cities can assimilate territories that have an outpost of yours in it, turning the outpost into an administrative center in the process, allowing quarters to be built adjacent to it as well, since most quarters have to be built adjacent to something. This is mainly done to improve a single city's potential output and strengthens your hold on the territory as well. Merging cities themselves together is also possible, but costs a ton of influence. This is mainly done to create super cities in my experience, and also looks very cool on the map as well. Quarters or districts really are the bread and butter of the exploitation in 4X here, increasing your reach, allowing more workers and therefore population as well, even showing what spot on the map has the highest yield for a given quadrant when you're constructing them. There's no limit on the amount of quadrants you can build per city, nor is there a limit to how many cities you can have in general, or how many territories you can assimilate to one city. So what is there to balance all of this out? Stability. Every city has an internal stability with a base value of 50. As you assimilate territories or build districts, this stability drops. Once stability drops below 30%, population in the city will start to leave. Uprisings should start. I haven't seen an uprising yet, so it could be that the system isn't implemented yet, or I just was very lucky. So every large city you have needs an administrator to keep this stability in check, especially in the early game when you haven't unlocked stability boosting buildings or civics yet. Administrators come in short supply, however, until you've gained more through, again, technologies or civics, so this stifles even the grandest city designs at the start of the game at least. The only limit on outposts is the required influence, however, so even the most determined expansionist can settle swaths of land pretty early, provided he can protect all of those outposts from enemy empires, of course. City stability, while being an important value, is relatively hidden though, as it does not appear on the city overview list, but is only visible in the city view per city. So if you want to check the stability of every city, you have to go through every city's city screen, which is a bit roundabout in my mind. Expanding and exploring brings you into contact with other empires, of course, which can go in mainly one of two ways. You either become friends, steadily improving your relations, improving your treaties, starting to trade, trading cookies and bunny rabbits with each other, or you become bitter rivals, wanting to slice open their necks and burn their cities down to the ground. The latter, of course, brings the need for military units. These are unlocked through technologies, like most things in the game, and some of the later game and more powerful units are also locked behind strategic resources like copper for units that use bronze, iron for units that use iron, or saltpeter for units that use gunpowder. These units do not cost any upkeep though. In fact, as far as I could tell anyways, nothing costs any upkeep whatsoever, not even improvements in the cities like, in Civilization. So usually you have a ton of money you can use to buy out either buildings or units. So what keeps you from buying out an entire army every turn and conquering the world by turn 30? Two main things. Military units are very expensive to buy out, and every military unit requires a population to train. So in the early game, when you still have low food production and small population cities, training a single unit can be quite a decision, because it stifles your production. Later down the line, I did start pumping out more pops than my cities could handle though, so this doesn't stay a consideration for long, but does put a soft cap on military rushes. Other empires are not the only threat out there. There are also independent people to find, which are essentially a mix between barbarians and city-states from the Civilization games. These can be peaceful or hostile, ransacking your quarters as they please. You can also find cities of independent people in territories that have laid bare for quite a while, and these can be assimilated over time as well. Once you've trained your army, made up out of whatever combination of units you choose, you can go to war. Declaring war is easy. You can always declare a surprise war if you want, but other empires will hate your guts for it, at least for a while. There's no easy way to declare a formal war that I've found, but there is a mechanic called grievances that is essentially the next best thing. This system isn't worked out fully yet, since there's a lot of clarity missing, but it's as follows. When you do something another empire doesn't like claiming a territory neighboring one of theirs, they get a grievance against you. Same for you if it goes the other way around. Then there's a choice to be made. You can push for reparations, demanding that the outpost be given to you instead, or you can just let it slide if you don't want to stay in a relationship if it's an empire you've been friendly with for a while. If you do push the issue, the other empire can either accept giving in to your demand, so giving you the outpost in the process, or call your bluff and actually go to war for it with you. This all applies vice versa, of course. These grievances aren't entirely clear all the time, however. Like, I can get a notification that an AI forgives my grievance I had no idea I had even committed in the first place, and there's no way of even seeing what type of grievance it was. Same thing with trading, with notifications popping up all the time that I'm trading something new with another empire or something along those lines, but no way of telling what this actually means. Are they buying my excess luxury goods? Are they buying my excess strategic goods? Is this just a notification telling me I've exploited a new luxury resource? I just don't know. During a war, you, of course, fight against other armies and lay siege to enemy cities. The actual combat plays out similar to both Endless Legend and Civilization. When two armies clash, the immediate area around them becomes the battlefield, like in Endless Legend. This you do have to keep in mind, as terrain differences and advantages are key to winning battles here. After deploying your units, the attacker goes first, and it becomes a mini turn-based war straight out of Civilization. This definitely feels more hands-on than the combat in Endless Legend, since your units act when you tell them to act instead of queuing up all of their actions and watching them play out in a single turn, and less of a drag than combat in Civilization, since one turn in the overworld, so to speak, is 5 turns in the battle itself, which also means that battles can last longer than 2 turns if the armies fail to annihilate one or the other during these 5 turns. To me, this is a best of both worlds scenario and feels quite fresh as well. Sieges bring fortifications and siege weapons to the table, with siege weapons being constructed during a siege, which is a lot more logical than them being constructed beforehand, but anyways, though you can just assault a city without any siege weapons whatsoever. Fortified city quarters make it harder for the attacker to move in, and makes it easier for the defender to actually defend, what with all the bonuses units get for being present on fortified tiles and whatnot. So constructing siege weapons counters this, but it can take a few turns for one to be constructed in your army. You don't have to fight all of these battles yourself, however. You can also opt for the auto battle function, even while you've already started a battle manually. A small issue here being that it's easy to forget that auto battle mode is on. So you start a battle and then instantly lose because it was auto lost. No indication as to your potential chances of victory either, though this could all be added in the full release, of course. Or maybe I should just pay a little bit more attention. I also seem to not get any notification about auto battles being won or lost. If the battle is won, then a post-battle report is visible on the map, like when you've won a regular battle, but if an auto battle is lost, your army just vanishes instantly. Winning a war happens, of course, by beating the enemy with a stick harder than they can beat you back, reducing their war desire to 0 in the process, or capturing all of their cities, which essentially is the same thing. These peace talks allow you to spend your own war desire to stake your claims, like taking occupied cities or territories. Empires as a whole are represented by their leader. In our case, this is Lucy, I think, because it's the Lucy OpenDev, probably. This leader stays the same throughout the game, with clothing dependent on the culture adopted by the empire at that time. The name of an empire on the map is also just the culture, so this can change wildly, from Mycenaean Greeks to Mongols, which can be a bit of a puzzling sight if you're not used to it yet or just not paying a lot of attention. Empires in diplomacy are also just referred to as Empire 1, 2 or 3, and with the diplomacy overview at the top of the screen, there's also no way to tell from a quick glance whether you're at war with an empire or whatever. I hope this gets changed a little bit as well, or that it's at least a bit clearer on the map itself or, in the menus. Though the empire's color on the map does stay the same throughout the entire game, so there's at least that. The leaders themselves look very nice though. Their animations can be a bit goofy sometimes, but in general this looks good enough for sure, with voice acting being present here as well. Even for regular units, which was quite a surprise to me, as this is usually not the case in games like this. It's not that major either, so you don't get sick of it after turn 50 either. And in battle, this is not present at all, which is a good thing, of course. The way these cultures can be chosen every era really enhances the replayability of the game, of course. Though again, the lack of clarity can hinder this a bit in diplomatic issues, for me at least. I know it's a relatively small issue, but it really stuck with me. The lack of general clarity really seems to be the central theme here. Things that are very clear are the more classic mechanics, like technology and civics. I've brushed over technology a bit already, but it's all very straightforward, with every technology unlocking either new quarters to be built, new units to be trained, new infrastructures to be constructed, new gameplay mechanics even, or just some general buffs. Civics are handled a bit differently, only being unlocked through certain thresholds being reached or certain, events being sprung or whatever. War-related civics usually come as issues surrounding a current war you are fighting, like how should we pay our soldiers? Civics surrounding religion only pop once you actually have a religion, and civics surrounding independent people also come as an issue once you've actually met some independent people. You know, it's all very organic that way. With a choice being presented, prompting you to decide between two different choices, either choice usually giving a buff and shifting your empire's ideologies on their respective axis. Depending on where on each axis your empire falls, you gain different bonuses, as well as determining how well you get along with other empires, with like-minded empires obviously liking you more. To make those choices the civics present you, you need a civic point, which you gain gradually over time, gaining them faster if your empire stability is higher. Another addition lifted from Endless Legend are the story events, with happenings across your empire needing your input, ranging from a simple choice between two temporary buffs or taking risks on different ventures. These impact your empire's ideologies as well and are just fun to read through. And finally, to round the video off, I did of course have some bugs here and there, as I've mentioned a little bit before, ranging from just minor visual flickering on the map to the audio totally breaking and the game grinding to a halt, which I've had about 3 times. These are no big deals, since the game autosaves every turn by default, and the game is still in alpha of course. But when you put a unit on auto explore and they're able to embark but can't safely navigate the ocean yet, the auto explorer AI doesn't give a shit and just lets them die on the high seas. I've lost some good sailors this way. Aside from the issues I do have, which was of course the focus of this OpenDev in the first place, to bring to light issues the community has with the game, Humankind definitely looks like it can challenge civilization, or at least find its own unique place in the historical 4X genre, and it is very clear the developers have learned a lot from Endless Legend and the flaws that game has. I have high hopes for the full release of this game in April, if all goes according to schedule of course. And knowing Amplitude, the potential DLC after that could very well make Humankind the must-have 4X game of 2021. That was it for me. Hopefully this video gave you a somewhat clearer look into what this game has to offer so far, and if you want to pre-order, feel free to do so. Again, I have high hopes and I have huge faith in Amplitude, so I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Hopefully this video also serves as some good feedback for the developers as well. And thanks for watching, happy holidays, and I'll likely see you next year. Goodbye and stay safe.